Hello and welcome to another episode of Talking TRM, the podcast dedicated to travel risk management. My name is Travel Risk Bex and I'm your host. And today, I always start this and I always start saying this is my friend, but again, I think this person really is. But she's also so much more than that. She's a work colleague. She's someone who has, in fact, you can't be much more than a friend. I'm not even going to go there. I'm going to stop. But the point is, we've known each other from a work perspective as well as just a friendship. So I've known you as your kind of careers developed and the stuff that you're doing. We met a few years ago. It was literally in the middle of COVID, I think around 2020, and we kind of had this meeting of minds, which is why I've been so stoked to do this with you because I just think it will be a really good chat today. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome my guest, Heather Haggis. How are you, Heather?
I'm so well. It's so nice to see you again, Bex.
I
And
know,
we've
it's
got
been
matching
ages.
hair.
I know, I love this. For anyone watching, look at
Yeah.
us. I know we actually met, didn't we? And I was just actually thinking earlier, was it was this year or was it at the end of last year when we did the
Last
Advantage?
year.
It
End of
was,
last
wasn't it?
year.
This year's flying. So
Yeah.
yeah, we actually got to meet in person, but we developed our relationship like it's absolutely good to do to these days online,
Mhm.
having lots of calls and conversations in the middle of COVID. And as much as everyone's kind of screaming to get back to travel and meeting people, and there is a place for that. I also stand that there is a place for actually having really good relationships and being able to develop really good one-to-ones. And actually, when you do meet, it's magical. But it doesn't have to be about that. So, Heather, I'm so pleased you're here. Thank you so much for joining us. So, let's get into question one. Heather, who are you and what is it that you do?
My name is Heather Haggis, as I've been introduced. So my current role is within the Advantage Travel Partnership, which are a very large travel consortia specializing in looking after travel agents. And just our CEO at the moment, Julia, is storming the UK travel industry and amazing work with the government as well. Like a just incredible woman, and it
Yeah.
is amazing to work with her. Where I've kind of come in for this is that I've got a background in business travel insurance and leisure travel insurance, which I'm going to be touching on today, which I've been doing now for the last 15 years. And it has been such an incredible career so far, and I'm really enjoying it. And it's really interesting because it's a part of the insurance world that isn't given that much consideration. Everyone talks about property insurance, everyone talks about liability insurance, and if we're talking about travel, they're thinking about aviation insurance. They don't think about the people, the people themselves moving around the world, and that's a really fascinating piece. And then on the flip side, coming into the travel industry, the insurance side isn't considered that much at all either. So I'm working on two different planes. I'm working in the insurance industry that isn't considering the movement of people enough, and I'm in the travel industry taking into consideration that they're not thinking about travel risk management enough and insurance enough. So I'm kind of trying to spearhead that piece. So I'm really pleased to be speaking with you, Bex, about this today. Um, my kind of background is with a company called Amtrust, who are like the largest insurer and one of the largest insurers in the world, and then also Aviva, which is closer to home, which I think a lot of the listeners will be more familiar with in terms of the brand. And I spent years working with our claims teams, with our risk management teams. And it's such a fascinating world. It really is. Because just as I was touching on earlier, in the insurance piece, generally people look after property, liability. And in the best way of the world, properties, when something goes wrong, it's either a fire, it burns down, it gets flooded. it's fine. We get it sorted, and it's usually about money. When something goes wrong with a person, however, so we've got a traveller, going from the UK to the US, or the US coming inbound. When things go wrong, they go horribly wrong because there's emotion involved, there's
Yeah.
stress involved. So it's something that I just want to kind of highlight to people, is that there's a new kind of thing to think about in travel risk management, and it needs to be a little bit more people focused, and there needs to be a kind of a more empathetic, side to travel risk management.
Thank you, Heather. I mean, I absolutely love this. So we had Bruce McIndoe on a show recently, and he talks about people risk management. So um, people risk Bruce, we're now calling him travel risk Bex. So he's completely behind this, and I think this is the whole point. You touched on it so nicely. I think we end at this end point of, insurance is just being something that you've got to do, and in order to get the quote for the insurance, you've got to provide data, and that data are just lines on a spreadsheet. What we've got to get to when we're thinking about travel risk management or people risk management is that every single line on a spreadsheet is a lived experience. It's something happening to a person. This isn't a building, like you rightly say. This isn't a piece of IP, which of course can have huge effects if anything happens or whatever. But this is and it's not when it comes to I think it is exciting about humans. I'm going to go off on one now a little bit because you never quite know what's going to happen. Humans are unpredictable. But the point is, if you put a framework and sort of security and safety and training around them, you can make them more resilient and you can make them more prepared. Whereas I think at the moment there's this kind of like, oh, travel, you all know how to do it. Just kind of crack on and off you go. And oh, and if anything goes wrong, we've just got insurance and we'll cover it that way. And it's not the right way to look at this, is it? It's about insurance almost being the lead piece in this. When you're looking at policies, it's about, well, what does your insurance policy actually cover you for to begin with? And I can't tell you how many people I've spoken to over the years who have no understanding what their travel insurance policy is for, especially around COVID when flights was beginning to get cancelled. I took numerous calls from clients, and we're talking, high up within businesses, and that's not to slate them in any way, but they just thought that they didn't really get that the travel insurance was about the medical and the repatriation. They thought it was about delays and getting covered for cancellations, and it just really threw me because I was like, in your personal life, you take travel insurance, you're not just getting it for a cancellation, you're getting it in case you have to cancel because you're ill or if something happens when you're away. It's the same thing, but we don't seem to be able to translate it very well. So I this is exactly what we kind of connected on, wasn't it? We geek out a little bit on this stuff, but ultimately it's because we love people and it's about protecting people and doing it better, right? So
Yeah, absolutely. It's exactly what you've just said. What was really fascinating was that because I was sat on the insurance side and I was having a look at the claims data, like you were just saying, we would have spreadsheets upon spreadsheets of just names and dates and what happened to them. It's just a line. You could scroll through it really quickly. What was really fascinating was taking out that data and starting to find similarities. So a medical is really, really good example of that. You could put different people into the same situation, and the kind of end point was so different. It was so varied
mm,
because of that human element. We a really good example would be I looked at two very similar claims that happened in Joburg. Two individuals, completely separate times, completely separate companies. Both of them went into what they thought were taxis. They were held at ransom. The drivers took these people out to cash points and just had them take out as much cash as they possibly could,
mm,
and then dump them somewhere. So that's the kind of that's the fact of the story. What actually happened in those two stories was completely different. The way that each one of them handled it. One of them, thankfully, was quite calm and had experience. Unfortunately, had experience of it. He actually had a security consultancy background to him, so he had been through training. This is exactly what you were just talking about. going through that training of what to do in these kind of situations. Unfortunately, the other person, what we later found out, had a disposition for anxiety and depression, and unfortunately, that person just crumbled, and unfortunately, that person was stabbed because they didn't react to the driver, person holding them hostage, quick enough.
Wow.
And so we have two very
Wow.
different scenarios.
Yeah.
Same thing.
Massively.
If you set a building on fire, what's going to happen? The building's going to go up, it's going to go down, and it'll probably, hopefully get rebuilt. This you can put. It's just incredible how putting individuals into these situations is so different. And precisely what you've just said in terms of the training piece, if we if the insurers are able to lead the risk management piece, sit down with these companies and say, right, okay, let's talk about what happens when your people go abroad, whether it's somewhere you would consider safe, or somewhere you would consider to be more high risk. Let's talk about how we can provide these people with the tools to do whatever is necessary to protect themselves and keep themselves and each other safe. And the claims examples I've just given you is a really good example of what happens when companies invest, insurance companies as well, invest in the risks and the people that they're covering to prove that these that things can be, when they do go wrong, they don't go so horribly wrong and they can be contained.
And it's about getting the fact that they do happen. Like, let's get out of this like pretense that
You really
not
do.
on my watch, or let's hope it happens to someone else. This stuff is going to happen, and how you
Mm.
react to it, and it's not always going to be the big stuff, right? It's how it happens. Don't get me wrong, a mugging or a carjacking is a big piece, but the point is it's
It's
to an
not easy,
individual.
though, is it?
Yeah,
You
no.
don't hear about it.
No, you don't at all, and it's all very hush hush, and actually the
Mm.
PTSD piece around that, and the family and everything else. Okay, let's get into your why a bit more, Heather. I mean, you've been
Great.
really open and honest with us, and I can see the passion. So, but let's just dive into that a little bit more. What is it that really drives you in this space? Because it's not an easy space to get into. It's not an
Mm.
easy way to invoke conversations about. So what is it that does it for you?
Definitely the people piece. I was underwriting, no, I was broking construction. So I was looking at big cranes and railway and aviation kind of on sites, and I really enjoyed it. And then what I found, what I was enjoying, wasn't the kind of millions upon millions of pounds worth of plant or the machinery. It was what's happening with the people using it, and I became almost kind of, I went down a kind of sociological kind of view. I started doing my own research into why do people act in certain ways. Why can you put two people in the same scenario and it leads to two very different endpoints? Um, and just by pure chance in that job, I met someone who said, "You really care about what happens to these people, and you're really passionate about insurance, which most people in my industry, we fall into insurance. You don't go through university once, or going through your 50, your teenage years wanting to go into insurance. But the part I was really, really passionate about was, if people end up in a situation where they didn't want to be in, they were just in the wrong place at the wrong time, or they were in a place which they expected to be, but it's gone horribly wrong. There's an opportunity to step in and say, "Hey, I've got this. Don't worry about this. Let me help you in getting this issue sorted for you, and allow me to assist you in working towards a resolution so that we can get you back on track." I was never smart enough to be a doctor to help people in a medical way. I consider the legal route of kind of being a solicitor or a barrister, and trying to help people with their contractual issues. But I found it really is the people side, and insurance is very people focused. We're a very people focused industry, just like travel. But this little niche, this corner of travel insurance is really,
Mm.
really fascinating. And when we can get involved in the claims, when we do get involved with the people who um, need our help or need us to drive their risk management piece. And it is really lovely when companies came forward. I used to work a lot with the charity sectors, particularly because it's those guys who, if a war happens or a tsunami or a medical issue happens abroad, we fly people out, but they're the ones sending people in. And it was really fascinating when they would come to me and say, Heather, we need to find ways in order to get our people across safely into these disaster zones. And I was like, I'm so up for the challenge for this. I want to do everything I possibly can. And when you see that success, I am like 0.00099% kind of a part of that success. But that tiny little kind of grain of sand of being able to say, hey, do you know what? I helped them get across. I helped protect their people. It's an incredible feeling. And to have those people come back safely, trust me, I don't want claims. I really don't want to see anyone going through anything. Even lost baggage is annoying at the best of times. But yeah, to see a successful trip, it's like, yeah, that was an operation and we have been able to achieve something, and it's a great feeling. And there's loads of learning points as well from it. Used to do quite a bit of work when Ebola kicked off back in, what was it, 2000? I can't remember now. 2014, was it 2014 ish? Maybe, don't quote me on the dates, but there was like, I worked with a number of charities when that was happening, and I was seeing how different charities were utilizing their people in different ways, how they were getting them across, what projects they were having them on, what went right, what went wrong. So it was really interesting to be able to take that kind of bird's eye view and see, right, okay, this is what's happened. This is what we can take from this. And this is what I can provide back to my team and say, if this ever happens again, let's not talk about the COVID word, but this ever happens again, this is how we can learn from it. And we can pass that knowledge back onto the companies and say, listen, one of your other charity partners, they did this during this particular disaster period. We want to be able to share that knowledge with you. And they're like, great, thanks. We'll learn from those mistakes, or we've learned from those success points. And it keeps their people safe. And it's just great to be a part of that journey, really.
I'm literally sitting here smiling and nodding, going, I completely get this. When I did my first recording with Jess, with our episode 0, just to kind of kick things off, I literally went, I don't know how to tell you, but it's about the people.
It
I
is.
think if you're an empathic person, or if you are, we've talked about being, neurodivergent in some way, maybe we just think
Mhm.
differently. But I've always been able to sort of put myself in the situation of someone that I'm talking to and try and kind of imagine different scenarios around it. And I think when people have asked me questions throughout my career about, how is this hotel house safe? What are you doing? I've really been like, I don't just kind of brush that off. I'm like, yeah, yeah, actually, I don't know. I can't be dishonest in the way that I work, and I don't want to be, and why would I want to be? Because actually we're sort of looking for the greater good, and I think that's what this kind of attraction to this travel risk management piece was always about. And it sounds like the same from you. I came from the leisure side when I started in so it was selling holidays, and it was selling adventure holidays. And these people were, okay, yes, you had serial adventurers who were going 3 or 4 times a year. But for the most part, for 80% of those people, it was once a year. It was an expensive trip. And I really cared about what happened to those people on those trips. And the way that that company worked was to actually have a crisis team and to do scenarios
Amazing.
and to practice. But that's because
Mhm.
they've had a horrendous thing happen many, many years before. It was learned
Yeah.
experience, and this is what they were putting in place. But it was my first sort of touch that there's all of this other stuff going on in the background that nobody really even has kind of any understanding about. And actually, in theory, you shouldn't even know about it, because if everything's going as it should do, then it shouldn't be an issue. But when it does go wrong, and unfortunately we're living in a world now where it's more complicated, there's more stuff happening, there's more of us, um, there's misinformation, there's all, it's just chaos at the moment. Um, we need to be prepared for that, and I agree with you. My mum was a midwife. She was, she went into nursing, and I just didn't ever want to. I just didn't ever want to follow that. I guess I saw the harsh side of it, how tired she was and all that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
Um, she cared for people, but I knew I couldn't do that. But this I can, to be able to go into companies and give them these frameworks to have these conversations. And it's interesting. You said some very similar things to Jen Milton as well. We who was on a podcast previously, and I wonder. And this isn't to say that men are not empathic; they are. It's fine. We all are. But I do see this common thread through the female side of this, that we just think about it differently. We somehow put ourselves into these situations and think, what if it was me? And maybe that's because we're women. Maybe that's because when we travel, we are more vulnerable in certain situations. So you don't always have to think of that as a 50-year-old
Mhm.
white man who's traveled all his life. It's a different scenario, and maybe that's where it comes from. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Do you know, I've got a really good example of that. Of um, but it all worked out in the end, so it is a little bit of a harrowing story. But
You want to
we,
share?
sorry,
Can you share?
I won't give like details like
No,
of
no, no.
names like
Yeah, yeah,
that, but
yeah.
it's
No.
the famous example that we used,
Yeah,
uh,
do.
of, of kind of how powerful empathy is, and I think this is where, yeah, having empathic people, particularly in my side of the industry, is so important. We had a charity who sent a young lady into one of the states where it's just not, I guess, kind of one of the more Arab states, places where women's rights were a little bit not as great as ours. Let's just say, I don't want to say the exact country. Um, and unfortunately, that girl was sexually assaulted and raped. And and the thing is that she did the what we would consider as Western women, the right thing. She went to the police. And I can see your face already. You
Mm.
already know where this is going. They put her in prison. So she had just been. She was also traveling on her own. And she'd just gone through this harrowing experience, and then she was thrown into a prison. And it was it caused so much uproar within our company, the insurance company, when we found out. Obviously, the charity went all up in arms, but unfortunately, because it was a considered legal, she wasn't imprisoned illegally. We couldn't just lift her and drop her back into the UK. But you know what the most amazing thing was that the claims team I was dealing with, they went absolutely berserk because actually all of them were men. And one of them had a daughter the same age as the girl who was gone through this. He went absolutely nuts. And he was like, under all circumstances, he was up. I can't even tell you how hard he worked. He did everything within his power to get that girl out because he put himself as the father of that girl and said, if that was my daughter, I will fight tooth and nail for her. And it was amazing how him and the team got so enveloped in what was happening to her. He was speaking to the charity, the HR team at the charity. He was speaking to the family. The insurance company was all behind this. And obviously, we got the girl out, and we got back to the UK, and we looked after her medical side over here as well. And we carried that on. Even several months later, we checked in on her, and it was just absolutely incredible. That was the first time I've ever seen that level of empathy, that level of power and passion behind the individual, rather than just being a statistic or just a number on a spreadsheet. So I have seen that this wave of empathy that's coming into the insurance industry, making such a powerful change from the travel risk management piece. Because if our guys on our side are saying we want companies to make sure that they send particularly possibly more vulnerable people out to territories where their vulnerability might be kind of exasperated. We need to help. We need to work with our policyholder, work with the company to say, how can we assist you in making sure that these people are safe? And that's where I'm really, really proud and pleased to be a part of this part of the industry, because this has really only happened, from my perspective, in the last 10 years. And like what drawing way back to the beginning of this conversation, it's about the insurance industry leading that travel risk management piece and saying, listen, we've got experience in this area. We want to help you. We want to work with you in order to make sure that your business trip is successful and these people are safe. And that's what I'm really proud of. It's moving a little bit too slow, in my opinion, but we're getting there.
I agree. Nothing's ever fast enough, though, is it? Because again, it's about people, and I think for every claim you think, "Oh, that could have been avoided," or for every, and I say
Yeah.
claim, what I mean is every experience of a person, but it gets to a claim is the issue. And you just think we could just do so much better at all of this, and it's there in our power. But we also get that companies have got a lot to do right now in a lot of different
Yeah.
areas. For me, it all just kind of comes together in this big melting pot of, well, it's the same thing. So if you kind of look after one piece, you're naturally going to look after another piece, and it's all under this sort of people risk management. But then, organizations are getting used to risk management. I agree massively the changes have happened in the last 10 years. This idea of disaster recovery, business continuity, risk management. Really, though, from an insurance's perspective, it's kind of what you've been built on, right? The
Mm.
understanding that so of course you should lead in this space, but I think it's about then you guys, I guess, leading the way because you know it. But then it's also
Mhm.
about, again, the travel providers, in my case, which is what I am obviously working with the corporates at the end point to develop programs, but the suppliers have got to come along. And at this point, you've got some great suppliers that are engaging, but there's still a lot of confusion around this, which I guess the work at Advantage can only help with as well, right? Because you've got not only the leisure side and you've got the TMCs and the leisure agents, but you've also got this huge supplier network as well, right? Where you can hopefully give them the support and the help that they need on this journey as well. Because there's always been this issue of responsibility, right? When a claim comes through,
Yes.
arguably. I
Mm.
think 31 and 30 is a bit of a leveler as far as that's concerned. It will be used in these cases. Um, but it's about educating everybody at the same time. But yeah, I'm all for insurance being actually spoken about. And I remember, like, in travel, going way back to a bit in the conversation earlier, we were business travel, we were never allowed to sell insurance, full stop, right? When I
Mm.
first started, it was all to do with the
Mm.
business, corporate, and that side. But leisure,
Yeah.
you were, but you had to do some training with the FSA, and you had to ensure that you weren't mis-selling. And it's kind of mid 90s, I guess, late 90s. So before that, there had been a lot of mis-selling with policies and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I just, we've never really cared about it. We never really talked about it. Whereas, with, and I guess it's because we kind of relinquish responsibility as the industry. We're just like, well, yeah, we do provide all this stuff, but it's up to you whether you get on it, and it's up to you whether you do this and make sure you're insured for it. So we sort of sit
Yeah.
aside from it, apart from obviously our own business insurances. Anyway, I'm diving into this a bit deep, so I'm going to pull us back. So I just want to, thinking about our listeners who are perhaps new to this space, who perhaps want to know how they can think about a travel risk management program. We've talked about leading from insurance. So what sort of tips, what are your golden nuggets, Heather, for anyone kind of wanting to explore this a bit more, please?
I think the main thing to remember is that it doesn't, if you think about insurance or you think about the ISO, it sounds like there's a lot of paperwork involved. I think this is why some companies have kind of kept away from the travel risk management piece. It sounds like we have to do loads of planning, and you have to sit down out of your day job and do all this paperwork and blue sky. But actually, you don't. We've got to remember that travel risk management is about people. And actually, we need to make action now. We can't just sit back and plan. I think, COVID is a really good example of that. No one could have really planned for that. What we've got to do is we've got to spring into action, and we need to know what our I'm trying to think of the word, like what are tools we can use, what's available to us. So firstly, for a company, if you've got corporate insurance, corporate travel insurance, the likelihood is that the insurer will have this toolkit for you already. You'll actually be able to find this within the policy wording. You don't have to dig too deep. It's usually in the first couple of pages, and it's usually something like an app. There's so many amazing travel risk companies, digital companies out there. I don't want to name them because I don't want to say one and not another, because there are quite a few where it's completely free on the policy to download this. There are companies who pay a lot of money for it, for these apps that say, what is the risk in particular countries? What do you need to think about when you travel to them? What are the concerns that you've got to consider whenever you're traveling by public transport, or if you want to eat out, or you want to go into a public space? These apps are really expensive, but insurers have taken on the brunt of the cost of this, and it's free to policyholders. Insurers, I'm going to name a few insurers, but obviously Aviva, RSA, Chubb, a lot of Lloyd's insurers as well. Download them, speak to your insurance brokers and ask them, what are the tools that my insurers can give me in order to make my travel risk management piece so much easier. And actually, if you do have a broker, or if you can speak to the insurer directly, sit down with the insurer, have a Zoom call or a Teams call if you haven't got time to do a face-to-face, and ask them, what in our space have you seen in terms of claims? What can we do to make sure that these claims don't happen to us? What can we do to better protect our clients, our employees, sorry? And throw it onto the insurer. Say to the insurer, give me a one-pager. What can I do? Give me a tick box. Throw it back onto them. You don't have to do the work. At the end of the day, you are probably busy enough booking the trips, or you are considering your employees. Throw it onto your insurer. This is what you pay that policy premium for. It's not a cost for a piece of paper. It really is. There's a huge amount of advice sitting behind in the insurance industry. Tap into them. Don't just speak to your broker once a month, once a year when you come up to renewals. I'll sit down with your broker and say, right, what are the opportunities and the toolkits that I can use that the insurers have got and are willing to give me for free? Because actually, you're probably paying for it anyway in your premiums. So that's the first thing that I would say is get in touch with your insurer, get in touch with your insurance broker, and have those candid conversations. The second thing that I would say is speak to your employees, get to know them really well. There is a really challenging piece at the moment. I know that this is challenging for an employer, because you've got to consider who is the best person to go out on these trips at any one time. So I'm going to talk about something that's a little bit cringy, but if you are going to do, a business trip into a particularly high risk area, are you going to send an employee who has a history of anxiety or PTSD, or who is going through a family traumatic event? You've got to take these into considerations, and you've got to be able to have those conversations with those employees and saying, I know that you're having a difficult time at the moment. How about we don't do this trip right now? We either put this on hold, we put this online, because going online is now an option. Or let's look at maybe another team member going out. You don't have to be that candid. I'm sure you can come around it in a slightly kind of more roundabout way. But we have a responsibility as employers to send out the best people at the best time. And maybe your best salesperson, or that particular director who has that relationship, is the best person. But given the circumstances that that person's going through, that personal side of it, that empathetic side of it, is it the right thing to do to send them out? So we as employers have to ask those questions as well. So there is two-pronged attack. So yeah, those are the two sides of it, and the most important part that I have tried to steer clear of is the paperwork side. It's just kind of, let's think about this, make a quick decision on it. As long as you can back it up, speak to your insurers, speak to your staff. Um, you don't have to sit down for hours and then doing paperwork.
Right. Heather, there's so many things I want to talk about, but I'm gonna just touch on a couple because like we're gonna invite Heather back and we're gonna have more conversations. I can feel this happening. But I think firstly, I yes, as far as your policy is concerned, this is why we talk about the insurance kind of leading everything because
Mhm.
you're gonna have possibly some sort of connection. Chubb do stuff with some of the assistance companies. I was about to
Yeah,
name drop, but they all do. I shouldn't say that. So there's all something. So potentially you're double stacking because you've possibly got something with your TMC, but you've also possibly got something
yes,
with your insurance company, and actually you need those two things to tie together.
absolutely.
And the data that's flowing between them, that's all really important. But I just want to touch back on this, push it back to your insurance company. I cannot emphasize this enough. Like having been, I know I wasn't insurance, I was obviously TMC, but as an account manager is what I'm trying to get at here. You want a relationship with your client. You don't want to see them once a year. That's not good enough. Like
Mhm.
you want to get inside them because you want to keep that relationship. So anything that a client can push back onto a supplier and which is going to engage and help them understand you better is a good thing. So I can assure you, unless you've got a terrible account manager, they'll be chewing at the bit to try and help you more and to want to learn. Because otherwise, when you come through to renewal, you're going to go with someone else potentially because they've got no understanding. It's got to be two way. This ability to build a relationship, and I just absolutely, I just really love that, and I think it's really really important. Um, and then this, talking to your travelers, understanding that they understand what's going on, the whole training piece, and having this, yeah, you just touched on it so beautifully. You do need to know who your people are. I cannot emphasize
Mhm.
this enough. You do need to know what's going on with them. And yes, if you're a massive company, that might sound like a total headache, but that's the whole point of having line managers and all of this other stuff going on. That's the whole point of having this sort of framework. It's how we've got to move away from this idea of paperwork. If you're having I'm just sort of these touch points that managers have, which we refuse to do around travel. um, this is exactly the point, right? This is exactly why you have these touch points to talk about this stuff, to make sure people are okay, to tune in. We don't just do it to have an assessment once a year. We do it to ensure that every day is working in the way that it should be, and that's where we need to get to with this stuff. Standards aren't there to be looked at once a year. Insurances aren't. They're there to help you a
Mhm.
little bit of investment up front, be it time more so than actually money, um, will actually mean that you do less further on down the line because it's working how it should do. So, everybody, you've been listening to another episode from Talking TRM. My name is Travel Risk Bex. This is the podcast dedicated to travel risk management in its widest possible capacity, and we're talking about people. Heather, thank you so much for being my guest today. It
Thank you.
was a pleasure. It was a pleasure to talk to you, and we'll catch up really, really soon. And keep doing what you're doing. I'm a big fan. Talk soon, everybody. Thank you. And in the meantime, take care.